So, in our investigation thus far, a perceptive seeker might feel as though they've missed something. The question is usually posed as follows. Were there not many races of varying color all sprouted from a single race? And if so, would they not be all of basically the same genetics? Would we not all be of sheep blood, since all elves and humans would have thus come from the same origins? And the answer is no. The creators you see did play with genetic material. They did work with our experimental races and whatnot. And for this we find the origin of the Ubaid in Mesopotamia, but this lore has been so often misunderstood that in the past it's even been used as a reason for misguided prejudice between races and even genocide, World War II, and even the Elven Holocaust, which we'll discuss. So where did this Aryan Dravidian race emerge separate from the rest? And if you find it hard to adjust to the idea that the elven blood still exists today, you may fall off your seat in hearing this, and that is that Adam of Eden in the garden was an elf. And not only is it proclaimed by the elves, but also the incorporation of this new paradigm actually allows the contemporary knowledge of Eden to make more sense. Consider this literal logic paradox. Assuming we take the Genesis as we are given it in the Holy Bible today at completely face value. We have Adam and Eve, we had Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel. That's it. So, in essence, as far as that descendantship, in terms of that original bloodline, would we not all be descendants of Cain? And then later we find out that no, they did have more children. But if we think of it in terms of good and evil, then descendants of Cain obviously being evil, and the descendants being the descendants of the evil brother, is a sound concern if you just accept that traditional bedtime story version of the Genesis. And in that we might believe this. But in order to understand the truth of the Elven Genesis, however, in essence we may actually be demystifying what we understand of in terms of Eden that we are given. Now, to do this, we turn to the original source of the story, the ancient Hebrew Kabbalistic tradition, which wizards, well, the true ones at least, they all revere this system. For in truth, the Genesis story of the Holy Bible is not necessarily Christian. It's Hebrew or Semitic or Jewish, to say the least. The very tradition that Christ was initiated into. One might note that the Hebrew Jews equally share a sense of genetic integrity concerning their mating customs. These practices are not maintained to enforce racial prejudice or bigotry, and they have nothing to do with living and trade per se. The concern is the ideal of genetic separatism that is usually considered politically incorrect by modern society, which usually is more interested in washing down genetic ancestry into this kind of hodgepodge, and if not, any inclination against that is a sign of racism or that you're not being a team player. And so, and it's obvious especially within America, that people with, half a dozen or more heritages are only producing more of the same, which results in that kind of disappearance of that pure gene pool in the name of cultural diversity. So, ethnicity and heritage does not seem to be considered very significant in modern society, except maybe in a case like tracing one's elvish descent. So now, again, the answer to that riddle being that Adam had more offspring than just Cain and Abel. Another thing of interest that you must go into Judeo-Hebrew Kabbalistic lore, because it's separated from the church, is that in addition to Eve, he also had a wife named Lilith. And while it may pose perhaps a contradiction to the viewpoint that certain Christian and Catholic sects are currently grounded on, the Hebrew would probably be the most inclined to have this right, given that it is their story. Though there's some confusion and other accounts as far as Moses being the second wise man and teacher of the Hebrew people. He was responsible for leading them, and he did this through cultural religion as a means to motivate the people, and therefore began with the story of Adam and Eve in order to give them an idea of where they came from. And humans have come to believe that this story began there finitely, while in the beginning it was merely just a story. But reading the text carefully, a clever seeker will find in about 15 minutes that after Cain kills Abel, he leaves for the land of Nod and becomes leader of the Nodites after marrying a cousin who is not related to either Adam or Eve by blood. So, although not in contradiction with, major events, the logic follows that Cain was not the son of Adam, and the Nodites did not originate in the Garden of Eden, or even from later offspring. So, while the story does not tell the origin of perhaps humanoid beings altogether as is thought to, the Holy Bible may offer a clue or allusions to that 9th generation of Elven-Ffayrie.